The clinking of silverware barely registered. I was too focused on Brittany's laugh, sharp and polished, the kind of brittle sound a wine glass makes just before it shatters. She's just his mother. I'm his future. She said it in a whisper, meant to be overheard. Her voice didn't tremble, didn't falter. It sliced through the room like it had a place at the table, like I didn't. I stood in the archway, holding an empty dish, my hands steady, my face smooth. I'd trained every part of myself to stay that way. Behind her, her parents chuckled like it was all part of some private joke. Greg didn't speak. Worse, he smiled. That faint, apologetic curve of the mouth he wore more often now, ever since Brittany started reimagining the house. The turkey smelled just as it should, brined with sage and lemon, the way I taught Greg when he was 12. The table still bore my mother's embroidered runner, but none of it felt like mine. Brittany had taken over hosting. The address hadn't changed, but the home had. Her beige pumpkins, her eucalyptus, her tiered trays sitting on the sideboard my grandmother left me, as though taste could be staged. No one noticed the slight tremor in my hands as I placed the sweet potatoes on the table. No one offered to help clear the dishes. No one looked back when I walked into the kitchen alone. And in that silence, I understood. This wasn't just entitlement. It was an erasure. The plates clinked softly into the sink. The rhythm of breath kept me steady. 4 in, hold, 6 out. That trick had gotten me through Henry's funeral. It worked again now. On the windowsill sat a porcelain sparrow, Greg's 3rd grade art project. To guard your kitchen, he had said. I looked at that little bird and wondered when exactly he'd stopped guarding me. I walked past the stairs, past the coats casually thrown over the banister like they owned the place, and up to the room that was still called mine. Lavender and old paper greeted me, faint and familiar. I opened the cedar chest and reached beneath the letters, the baby shoes, the remnants of a life once shared. I pulled out a folder and sat down at my vanity, the lamplight soft but honest. The deed was still crisp, still signed. Elaine Harper, sole owner of 1327 Willow Bend Lane. Not Greg's name, not Brittany's, just mine. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply pressed my fingertips to the seal, a quiet reminder to the house of who had loved it without condition. And I felt it. The house remembered. The backsplash was the first thing I noticed. Cold gray subway tiles with black grout. It looked like something out of an airport bathroom, stark, sterile, and proud of its indifference. The honeycomb pattern Henry and I picked out in 1989 had been chipped away, gone without a word. It wasn't a renovation. It was a deletion. Oh, did you see? Brittany's voice chirped behind me. She stood barefoot in a silk robe, the kind that slid off the body like a smirk. It really brightens the kitchen, don't you think? I didn't turn. My hand was still resting on the tile. I think it looks like everyone else's kitchen. She laughed like I'd complimented her. Well, Greg thought it was time to update, especially with the holidays coming. Greg, my son. The same boy who once cried when his favorite mug cracked because it was the one I always used for his cocoa. Now apparently fine with bulldozing memories, so long as Brittany called it modern. I turned and watched her reach into a ceramic jar I didn't recognize, pulling out biscotti that smelled of almond and factory. I moved the mugs, she said casually. Top shelf was too high for you. Too high for me. I opened the cabinet. My blue willow cups were gone. 40 years they had lived on that shelf. Not broken, not chipped, just removed. Rearranged like I was some fragile antique to work around, a problem to accommodate. Upstairs, if I could still call it upstairs, things were worse. My new room felt like a hotel suite that no one had bothered to clean properly. The old master bedroom had been taken over. Brittany's perfumes lined the dresser. Greg's electric toothbrush blinked from the outlet. The framed wedding photos on the nightstand didn't include me. Not one. I hadn't agreed to move. I had simply been told. Brittany had back pain. The mattress in the master was better. These things were said like facts, kind, reasonable facts, and I had been expected to nod along. At church that Sunday, Margaret Green hugged me and said, "It's so lovely you're letting them stay while you enjoy retirement. Downsizing can be such a relief." I blinked. "I haven't moved." "Oh," she said, tilting her head. "I thought Brittany said you were living in one of those senior garden homes near Forest Ridge." That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, my table, beneath pendant lights Brittany called statement pieces. The only statement they made was that my voice no longer mattered. The living room had been repainted in eggshell and rearranged like a Pinterest board. My rocking chair, the one Henry built with his own hands, had been moved to the garage, replaced by a beige sectional that swallowed the room whole. Later, I opened the bottom drawer of the file cabinet. The deed was still there, silent, steady, mine. No joint tenancy, no transfer, no oversight, just a promise no one thought I'd remember. Greg had once said, "Don't worry about all that, Mom. We'll figure it out later." Well, later had arrived. Mornings became quieter, not because the house was calm, but because I stopped trying to be heard inside it. I moved along its rooms like a tenant who knew not to disturb the owners. Brittany began using phrases like entertaining space and updated flow, like she was preparing the house for someone who wasn't me. They had claimed the master suite. My room upstairs still smelled faintly of lavender and old paper, though now it carried an undercurrent of something synthetic, whatever Brittany pumped through her oil diffusers. I began spending more time there, not in retreat, but in preservation. It was the only place left untouched, the last room where I could breathe without the scent of reinvention pressing against my skin. One evening, I opened the top drawer of my bedside table. Inside was the file I had placed there after Thanksgiving, now sealed in a manila envelope. I slid it out and opened it slowly, letting the lamplight brush across the crisp edge of the deed. My name stood there again, sole owner. The ink hadn't faded. Neither had the meaning. I turned it over, confirming the dates. Paid in full. No liens, no co-signers, no transfers. Greg had never been added. He had never asked. I had never offered. At the time, it seemed like an act of trust. Now, it felt like a long-buried seed, growing in silence. They assumed too much. Brittany walked through the halls like the house had chosen her. She introduced me at gatherings as Elaine, Greg's mom, as though my role came with an expiration date. Her friends called the kitchen hers, complimented her upgrades, her aesthetic. No one asked what was there before. One morning, while loading the dishwasher, I noticed the chipped ceramic mug Henry had bought me during a trip to Asheville was gone, replaced by matching stoneware that looked like it had been curated for an open house brochure. The mug wasn't broken. It had simply disappeared, like so many other things. Downstairs, the couch had been repositioned. The photo wall now held black and white reprints of our old family photos, drained of color to fit Brittany's palette. A stranger's version of our past. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened a different drawer, this one deeper, heavier. Inside, letters from Henry, Greg's baby blanket, the hospital wristband I never threw away. These were not decorations. They weren't curated. They were proof that I had been here, that this home was never just drywall and lighting plans. It was sweat and sacrifice. Greg came home late that evening. I heard him in the hallway, laughing softly into his phone. I listened to his footsteps pass my door, not once hesitating. Once he would have stopped in. Once he would have told me about his day, asked about mine. That version of him was somewhere deep in the past, unreachable now, blurred by comfort and convenience. I placed the deed back in its folder, then slid it beneath the quilt in my drawer. I wasn't ready to act. Not yet. But I had clarity now. They didn't know what I still held, and I wasn't about to remind them. The house didn't shout when it changed. It shifted in whispers, a candle replaced, a drawer rearranged, a shelf emptied without notice. It wasn't until I opened the linen closet one morning and couldn't find the quilt my mother had stitched by hand that I realized how thoroughly I was being erased. In its place was a faux fur throw Brittany had found online. She called it cozy luxury. I touched it once. It felt like silence pretending to be comfort. There was a quiet kind of mourning that followed, not for the fabric or the colors or the missing cup on the mug rack. It was for the way history vanished when no one else remembered it but you. I had kept that quilt folded neatly at the base of the bed for 30 years. It was the last thing Henry had slept under, now that it lived somewhere I wasn't invited to see. That night, I sat at the kitchen table while the dishwasher hummed behind me. Brittany's new appliances ran so quietly it felt like the house was trying not to disturb her. The pendant lights above cast a dim, calculated glow. She called them statement pieces. I couldn't tell you what they were trying to say. I looked at the walls, once covered with family snapshots and uneven paint swatches from our years of indecision. Now they were white. Not the warm kind, the kind that developers use when they want buyers to imagine someone else living there. And that's when it clicked. Brittany wasn't just decorating. She was staging for a life where I didn't exist. Later, I passed the front hall and noticed the family calendar had been cleared. No birthdays written in my handwriting, no church potlucks, no garden days. Brittany's neat cursive had replaced them all. Work events, yoga class, weekend getaways. Mental reset, she had labeled one, like erasure could be a form of self-care. When I checked the pantry, the shelf where I kept Greg's favorite cereal had been filled with jars of chia seeds and imported teas. The box I always bought, same brand, same aisle, same bowl he used to cradle in his lap, was gone. I didn't say a word. The next morning, I texted Cassandra. Just 3 words. Let's talk Monday. No explanation. She didn't ask for one. After 40 years of friendship, she knew how to read the weight behind a silence. Sunday evening, while Brittany adjusted throw pillows for a photo she said she might post, I stood in the kitchen archway again. This time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like a lock that no one had remembered to check. I walked upstairs and opened my drawer. The deed was still there, as untouched and steady as the woman who had paid every installment without fail. They thought they'd settled into a legacy, but what they had was a lease. And I was done watching the furniture rearrange while my name disappeared. Cassandra's office hadn't changed in a decade. The same faded rug underfoot, the same wall of neatly labeled binders. She greeted me with her usual unhurried glance over the rim of her red reading glasses and gestured toward the worn leather chair across from her desk. "Sit, Elaine," she said without ceremony. "You look like you've already bitten someone." "I'm past biting," I replied, placing the manila folder on her desk with a deliberate thud. "I'm ready to amputate." That made her pause. She closed her laptop with a soft click, pushed a few case files aside, and poured 2 mugs of black tea from the pot she kept just off-center. No cream, no sugar. She knew how I took it. She opened the folder with practiced hands and spread the contents across her blotter. The deed, the purchase agreement, tax records, everything in pristine condition. "You own it free and clear," she said, flipping a few pages. "No mortgage, no liens, not even a home equity line." I nodded once. "Henry and I paid it off early. I never added Greg." "Because he didn't want to deal with the paperwork," she recalled, eyes narrowing. "He may regret that now." He already does, I said quietly. He just doesn't know it yet. Cassandra leaned back, swirling her tea. So what's the plan? I want them out, I said, quietly, without drama, until it's too late for drama to stop anything. That's asking for a unicorn, she said, but there was a smile behind her cup. Lucky for you, I raised them. From the window of her corner office, the world looked small, manageable. The kind of view that made you believe even family could be restructured if you had the right documentation. You've got options, she said, moving into business mode. Private sale, cash buyers only, no family signatures needed, no probate drama. You'd have to give them notice after closing, but yes, it can be done. I want it done before Easter, she blinked. That soon? They think I'm sentimental, fragile, maybe even soft in the head. She nodded slowly. That's the danger of growing old with a polite smile. They forget you're still sharp. I watched a sparrow land on the windowsill outside her office. A small, plain thing, not unlike the one Greg had made me in 3rd grade. I had guarded this house for almost 4 decades, but they had mistaken my silence for surrender. That evening, I called Jordan, the private agent Cassandra had worked with before. Discreet. No lawn signs, no online listings, just quiet showings to vetted buyers who wouldn't flinch at the idea of closing with tenants still inside. When she arrived 2 days later, clipboard in hand and eyes sharper than any decorator's, she took one look around the staged living room and said, "They tried to flip it like an asset." "They tried," I said simply. She nodded. "You ready to take it back?" "I'm not taking it back," I said. "I never gave it up." Jordan smiled. "Let's remind them." Maria arrived on a Sunday morning, 5 minutes early. She stepped onto the porch like someone entering a church, not out of fear, but reverence. Her sister trailed behind, carrying a folder and a phone. I opened the door and let them in without flourish. No speech, no performance, just space. The sun was beginning to spill through the front windows, the way it always did when the season turned and the hydrangeas in the garden started their quiet rebellion against the cold. Brittany had wanted to replace them with gravel and succulents. "Low maintenance," she said. I hadn't stopped her. I'd simply waited. Maria paused in the hallway, eyes drifting up toward the crown molding, then down to the scuffed wood floors that no amount of staging could fully erase. "The house feels like it remembers things," she said softly. "It does," I answered, leading them into the kitchen. There were no distractions. The table was bare except for 2 teacups and a simple pot of Earl Grey. I had changed the pillows in the living room, removed the beige ones Brittany had picked, replaced them with the old embroidered set I kept boxed in the garage. They didn't match the decor. That was the point. Maria's fingers traced the edge of the fireplace mantel. Her eyes stopped on the porcelain sparrow, now returned to its rightful place. "Did you raise a family here?" she asked. "Every inch of it," I said. "Now it's time for someone else to." Talia flipped through her phone. "This is well under value for the area." "Quick sale," I replied. "I'm downsizing quietly." The quiet didn't last long. At exactly 10:02 a.m., the door unlocked. Greg's voice carried first, somewhere between casual and unsettled. "Elaine?" Then Brittany's heels, clicking like punctuation. "Why is the console table gone?" I didn't rush. I kept pouring tea as they came around the corner and saw Maria and Talia standing in their kitchen. Their kitchen, if you asked them. Greg froze. Brittany blinked like a light flickering too fast to process what it was seeing. "Who are these people?" Greg asked, though the tightness in his voice said he already knew. I turned, steady. "Maria Delgado and her sister Talia, They're touring the house. Brittany's mouth opened, then closed. Her face flickered from confusion to disbelief to something sharper. You're selling the house? I'm passing it on, I said. She stepped forward, voice cracking. You can't just... I can, I said. And I am. Greg looked at me like I'd become a stranger in the span of one sentence. I offered no apology, no softening. I turned back to Maria and smiled gently. Let's give them a little space to picture themselves here, shall we? We moved to the porch. Inside, I heard Brittany's voice rise, then fracture. By the time Cassandra arrived with the folder, the silence in the kitchen had grown dense. She handed Greg a paper, crisp and final. A 30-day notice to vacate, filed and time-stamped. Brittany stared at it like it was written in a language she'd never been expected to learn. That night, I sat in my room, the door closed, but not locked. The house settled around me, making the same soft groans it always had when the sun shifted behind the backyard fence. It wasn't mourning, it was memory, and it had chosen its side. The packing tape echoed like a slap against the walls. Brittany crouched in the hallway, folding Greg's sweaters with the grace of someone trying not to scream. But she didn't fold, not really. She shoved, balled, crammed them into boxes with the violence of someone finally understanding they weren't leaving by choice. Downstairs, Greg was silent. His hands moved across bubble wrap and picture frames like he wasn't sure what belonged to him anymore. Most of them were black and white copies Brittany had ordered to look more curated. None were originals. None held weight. Not anymore. I didn't offer help. For years, I had given them comfort, space, the kind of quiet loyalty that can't be measured. Now I gave them time to feel the emptiness they once thought I should accept. At one point, I stood in the dining room archway, sipping tea from a chipped mug Brittany had tried to hide in the back of the cabinet. It tasted better than anything served in their matching stoneware sets, maybe because it was still mine. She muttered under her breath, "Unbelievable. We moved our whole life in here." I answered without raising my voice, "No, you moved into mine." She flinched, stood too quickly, hit her shoulder against the closet door. Her mascara had started to smudge, and for the first time, she looked less like a woman in control and more like someone unraveling thread by thread. "You're just going to stand there," she snapped, "while we pack up our lives like criminals?" "I'm standing here," I said, "because I live here, legally, emotionally, financially, for 38 years. Greg appeared at the bottom of the stairs, one hand on the railing like it could steady him through the conversation he didn't want to have. "Mom," he started, "do you really have to watch us do this?" I looked at him the way I used to when he was 10 and lying about breaking a vase, calm, unmoved, already knowing more than he thought I did. "I watched you erase me," I said, "so yes, I do." They didn't reply. The house creaked in the afternoon heat, that old familiar groan when the light shifted through the south windows. It used to be the sound of a home settling. Now it felt like it was exhaling. An hour passed, then 2. I made a sandwich, read half a chapter. Brittany stormed downstairs, clutching a stack of envelopes. "Where's the paperwork?" she hissed at Greg. "The deed, the trust documents. Where is it?" Greg, barefoot now and hollow-eyed, shrugged. "Mom keeps it in the file cabinet." "Why?" "Because," he said, his voice faltering, "she always did." She ripped through a folder and froze. "My name's not on anything," she whispered, then louder, turning to him with fire in her eyes. "You said she added us. You said it was handled." "I thought she did," he said, barely above a whisper. "I never checked." Brittany's voice cracked like something brittle finally giving way. "You never checked?" "No." She looked like she might scream again, but nothing came. Just breath, short and frantic. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. "You never owned it," I said from the hallway. "You never did." She turned to Greg, searching for some last piece of control. "Go talk to her. Fix this." He didn't move. He looked at me instead. "What do you want me to do?" he asked her. "She owns it. We lost." The words dropped between them like a gavel. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower buzzed. A reminder that the world didn't stop for denial, and neither did I. She was still holding the paper when her knees hit the couch behind her. Greg didn't sit. He stood near the entryway, shifting his weight between feet like he couldn't decide which direction regret should pull him. Brittany held the deed like it might dissolve in her fingers if she stared hard enough. "You said she added us," she whispered again, voice low and cracked. "You said—" "I thought she did," Greg replied. "I didn't think we needed to check." "No," she snapped, finally looking up. "You didn't think at all." I watched from the archway, steady, not hidden, not cold, present, the way a boundary stands, not to punish but to define. "I gave you this house," I said evenly. "Not on paper, not in name, in trust." Neither of them answered. "You treated it like a stepping stone," I continued. "I treated it like a foundation." That landed. Brittany's expression flickered, not in shame, not yet, but in calculation, the math of consequence, finally running out of places to hide. "You can't just kick us out like we're nothing," she said, her voice rising too fast, "like we didn't make memories here." I nodded slowly. "You did, but memories aren't ownership." Greg dropped onto a stool, rubbing the back of his neck like it might summon the years he'd let drift. "She didn't mean it the way it sounded," he said quietly, not looking at me. "That night, Thanksgiving, what she said, she didn't mean it." "She said it to her parents," I replied. "She said it for me to hear." He finally looked up, really looked, and for a moment I saw him. Not the man distracted by modern light fixtures and curated social media posts, but the boy who used to bring me coffee in a chipped mug while I gardened. The boy who once asked if roses get lonely in winter. He was still in there. Just buried under layers of silence he thought would keep peace, but only fed erasure. Brittany's voice snapped the moment. "We'll take you to court." "If you think that will go well," I said, pouring more tea, "you're welcome to try, but you'll need something stronger than we lived here, rent-free, and thought it meant forever." Cassandra entered then, charcoal blazer, heels that didn't announce themselves. She handed me a folder, then another to Greg. "This is your formal 30-day notice to vacate," she said calmly. "Filed, time-stamped, binding." Greg's hands didn't move. Brittany just stared like the words were abstract, theoretical, a lesson meant for someone else. "I've already initiated the transfer of title," Cassandra added. "The buyers have funding, inspections clean, closing is confirmed." Brittany muttered something I didn't catch, probably for the best. Later, I stood at the top of the stairs, watched her crouch beside a pile of sweaters, still folding them like maybe the right angles could undo the moment. Greg was in the guest room, wrapping up the black and white reprints they'd once thought elevated the house. I didn't speak. I didn't move. Because the truth was clear now. It wasn't that I outsmarted them. It was that they never thought they had to look. The voicemail came at 9:13 p.m. His name lit up my phone with a softness I hadn't felt in months. Greg, no last name. Just 5 letters I used to answer without hesitation. I didn't press play. Not then. I set the phone on the counter beside the kettle, poured my tea, and watched the steam rise like something letting go. The next morning, Cassandra dropped by. She carried her briefcase in one hand and a box of shortbread in the other. We sat at my new kitchen table, secondhand oak, scratched and solid, and reviewed the final documents. The trust had been formalized, the house sale completed, my will updated, notarized, sealed. Greg and Brittany have been removed from all beneficiary designations, she said plainly, her voice like a scalpel, precise, not cruel. I nodded. And the new heir? She pulled out a simple card. Delia Morris, 27, nursing student, daughter of your late friend Evelyn. She calls me every Sunday, I said, not because she wants anything, just because she remembers I'm here. Cassandra signed the final page and passed me the pen. You're sure? I'm finished, I said. This isn't about revenge. It's about release. 2 days later, Greg knocked on my door. Once. Quietly. I didn't answer. He left a small envelope wedged beneath the mat. Inside, his old key and a note that simply read, "For when you're ready." I placed it in a drawer I no longer opened. Brittany didn't knock. She posted. A carefully filtered photo of a sunset and a caption laced with accusation. Some people age with grace. Others rot in bitterness. Sad what fear of passing the torch can do to a person. Friends tagged me, sent screenshots. I didn't reply. I didn't log in. Cassandra replied for me. A certified packet arrived at their new duplex 2 days later, a copy of the revised will, a cease and desist letter, and a legal disclaimer barring any future claims or contact. It was polite, ironclad, final. That night, I watered the small herb pots on my balcony, basil, mint, thyme. The rosemary was already blooming. The air carried the scent of grilled food from a neighbor's patio and the low murmur of jazz from the brewery across the street. I sat with a glass of water and let my body exhale. It wasn't silence. It was something better. Stillness. Around 11 p.m., I saw him, a figure across the street, under the amber glow of the street lamp, shoulders slouched, hands in his jacket pockets. Greg. He didn't move, didn't wave, just stared up at the building like he wasn't sure which window held the version of me he remembered. I didn't move either. He didn't need to know which window was mine. He didn't need to know if I was even watching. The next morning, Cassandra called. Everything's finalized. No loose ends. Feels like a strange kind of freedom, I said. She paused. That's because it is. Later, I opened the voicemail, not to keep it, just to know. Hey, Mom, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for a lot of things. I guess I know it doesn't matter now. I deleted it. Not pause, not save for later, just gone. The knock came on a Sunday, not early enough to be thoughtful, not late enough to claim brunch traffic, just calculated, the way Brittany always was when she thought charm could rewrite memory. I opened the door with the same neutrality I used to reserve for distant relatives at funerals. Greg stood holding a plastic-wrapped bouquet from the grocery store. Brittany smiled too widely and held out a gift bag dressed in tissue paper that rustled like forced cheer. Happy Mother's Day, she said. You did surprise me, I answered, stepping aside. They walked into my apartment like tourists. Brittany's eyes moved from my mismatched throw pillows to the books stacked on the windowsill, taking inventory of what didn't match her aesthetic. Greg kept glancing at the kitchen, where I'd already filled a vase with cold water. You've made it cozy, he said. I didn't have to compromise this time, I replied. I sat on the couch and began pulling tissue paper from the gift bag. Inside, a set of clearance hand lotions in clashing scents, and a candle labeled Serenity, marked down with a red sticker. I held it in my hands for a moment longer than politeness required. Thank you, I said. I've been running low on artificial scents and plastic tubes. Greg winced. Brittany's smile tightened. It's just something relaxing. You know, self-care. I've already started, I said, returning the tissue to the bag. In fact, I think I'll continue some this afternoon. A pause stretched too long. Then Brittany cleared her throat. We were thinking, she began. Maybe we could all do Easter together, like it used to be. No pressure, just family. I looked up slowly. This Easter? Next month? She nodded. Greg added, we thought it might be a step forward. I already have plans. Brittany leaned in, softening her voice like someone offering a deal. We could join you. No, I said. They're private, with people who don't try to erase me after dessert. Greg's mouth opened, then closed. But we're family, he said finally, like it was a fact immune to revision. You were, I said. The room went still, not tense, not angry, just still. The kind of quiet that arrives when a door has been shut, not slammed. I stood and gestured toward the hallway. Thank you for stopping by. They hesitated, then moved. As Greg stepped into the hallway, I handed him the gift bag, still full. For Brittany, I said. She needs it more than I do. I closed the door with the same quiet finality I had used to seal the envelope Cassandra mailed 2 days earlier, a cease and desist letter. No contact, no forwarded mail, no unannounced visits, certified and filed. That afternoon, I sat on my balcony with a cup of lemon tea, listening to the breeze pull through the trees like it had nothing left to carry. Across town, the porch of my old house was blooming with hydrangeas. Maria had planted them in early spring. But that wasn't the story. The story came when Brittany stood in front of that porch, crying, pleading, pointing, and Maria, one hand resting on her small rounded belly, said with calm finality, "This was never your house." The police wrote the trespass warning with practiced hands. Greg arrived 10 minutes too late, and as Brittany sobbed on the curb, mascara trailing toward her jawline, Greg didn't reach for her. He just said, "We ruined it ourselves." And I, 3 blocks away, sipped my tea without looking back. It wasn't revenge, it was a boundary, and this time it stayed closed. Easter morning arrived without ceremony. No guest towels folded, no frantic reheating of casseroles, no passive-aggressive place cards or strained smiles over ham. I brewed my coffee slowly, peeled an orange into a white bowl, and opened the window above the sink. The breeze carried jasmine from the courtyard below, gentler than anything Brittany ever tried to bottle. I let it in. At noon, Dalea arrived. She wore a pale blue dress with a cardigan too light for the wind, but she never complained. Her smile was steady, grateful, not performative. She carried a paper bag from the bakery on 9th and a bouquet of daffodils still wet from their wrappings. We set the table together. Nothing matched. Every plate a different pattern, every glass a different story. And it felt right, unmanicured, alive, unapologetically pieced together like the people who sat at it. Across from us, her friend Marta passed around rolls. Her cousin Mateo carved the roast with the confidence of someone who'd never been told he wasn't enough. The room filled with sound, laughter that didn't try to prove anything, forks clinking, someone humming near the window. No ghosts, no held breath, no one waiting to be uninvited in their own home. I looked around the table, not for approval, not for attention, just to remember it, the color, the warmth, the proof that new things could grow in old soil if you stopped trying to make it look like the past. When Dalea raised her glass to toast, she didn't make it about gratitude or legacy. She just said, "To a table that made room." That was enough. The letter wasn't long, just a few sentences written in my own hand, sealed and filed with Cassandra for some day far from now. It began with, "To whom it may concern, I lived here with my whole self." The house had new curtains now. Maria's husband hung them one Saturday morning while their baby slept in a sling on his chest. They planted lemon trees in the back, where Greg once built a sandbox I eventually turned into a bed of lavender. I didn't visit. I didn't drive by. I didn't follow them on social media to see what they did with the space I left behind. Because that's what legacy is. Really, it's not the furniture, not the walls, not the soil. It's what grows when you stop chasing recognition and start choosing peace. It's the kind of story no one applauds, but everyone feels when they walk into the room. I never spoke to Greg again. He didn't send another voicemail. Brittany's account went silent not long after the trespass notice. Maybe they moved. Maybe they stayed. Either way, it no longer involved me. Delia texts every Sunday, usually just a line, still using your biscuit recipe. Mateo fixed the faucet. Your old chair fits perfectly in the sunroom. Nothing grand. Just proof that something I left behind kept breathing. That spring, I donated the last of my formal wear. The dresses worn to birthdays where I wasn't thanked. The scarves I'd bought to soften rooms I was being pushed out of. I folded them with care, not bitterness, just finality. Before the last bag left my closet, I found an old photo tucked into the lining of a handbag. Greg, 6 years old, covered in glue and glitter, holding up a lopsided Mother's Day card. His grin wide, tooth missing. No one else in the frame. I didn't cry. I didn't keep it. I placed it on the bench by the community mailbox with a note, free to good stories. Then I walked back upstairs, made tea, and opened the window. The jasmine was still blooming, and I didn't owe anyone an explanation for why I had left.